trying to mimic the classroom setting as much as possible, and try to have some interactivity. And I have some group work. I have some breakout sessions in which I have placed. I have made about 6 groups, and during the breakout sessions, you'll have the group work. I sent this morning an email to everybody with the exercises, and hope that you were able to access that. If you haven't accessed your email yet, do so. And when you go in the breakout sessions, there'll be 5 to 7 people in your group, and you could discuss the questions, and then we'll come back and go over the answers, and then continue with the lecture. I don't know how long this session will take. I'm trying to try out new technology, so hopefully it'll all work. But as it happens often with technology, there's bound to be something that will not work. So let me share my screen from this board. Right, so does everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, as I said before, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question. However, if there's a lot of background noise from where you are, it's probably best to just keep yourself mute. Okay. Having said that, any questions about anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. So let's see. Right, so we're going to spend some time going over how to write questions on a survey. And there's a rhyme and reason to writing down questions, and it's not as simple as I used to think it is. Okay, and I used to write down questions, and then I get 300 people to answer the survey, and then while analyzing the survey, and then I ask myself, why did I ask the question this way? This makes no sense. And so there is an art, and I'm still trying to develop that art, and I just thought I would share with you some of the things I've been learning in the last year or so. So let's see. So this is the agenda. Start with the introduction. Why do we do questionnaires? We'll talk about scales, the type of questions to avoid, and then we're going to talk about the differences between perceptions, attitudes, knowledge, and opinions, and see what's up with that. So one first point of clarification is that we use the word survey and questionnaire interchangeably, and formally, what we're dealing with is a questionnaire, and a survey actually means we survey a population to distribute a questionnaire. But having said that, old habits die hard, and we usually wind up interchangeably use survey and questionnaires. Okay, so when to use a questionnaire? One, when resources and money are limited. However, a questionnaire could be inexpensive. However, the preparation could involve a lot of time, especially when you try to validate a survey. And we're not going to talk about validating a survey today. We'll save that for another session. And the validation efforts could be costly as well. want to use a survey when, especially if you want to protect the privacy of the participants, especially if you have questions that involve sensitive issues. Also, especially if it involves sensitive issues, because a survey is usually anonymous, participants feel quite comfortable giving, hopefully, their true responses. Quantitative data, easy to analyze, though I guess don't say that to a statistician, right? And you can have broad coverage. Nowadays you could send a survey all around the world with SurveyMonkey, or you could use social media to distribute a survey. However, the disadvantages of a survey is that there's no clarification for ambiguous questions. There may be inadequate motivation to respond. Someone could start a survey and all of a sudden say, this is not for me, and skip the rest of the questions. Something obviously we'll talk about today is that we could have poorly worded questions, and if you have poorly worded questions, then the data you get will not be good. There could be a low response rate, and the most important thing about a questionnaire, you have all these answers, but it doesn't answer why the participant answered it the way he or she did. And one thing, if I could diverge, one question could be, when do you use a questionnaire versus when you want to do qualitative research, interviews, or focus groups. And essentially, the interviews or the qualitative research will answer the question why. And it, I could take about 5-10 minutes explaining when do you do a questionnaire first or an interview first. And it's essentially, I'll say it briefly, when you're exploring what you think is a new topic, then you, and at that time, you really have no idea what questions to ask. Then you want to do the exploratory activity first, which would be qualitative research interviews, and you get a sense of what a lot of people are thinking about, and then you could quantify the responses. Now, if you know that you could develop a questionnaire first, then you do the questionnaire, and then you get all these responses, and now you want to do an explanatory activity, which would then be the interview or the focus group activity. So, having said all that, let me walk you through this slide. This is the sequence of questionnaire development, and just looking at this slide tells you it has many, many steps. And essentially, you identify your target audience, your purpose, you generate questions, and your variables, your independent and dependent variables, and then you want to know essentially what you want. Do you want to know knowledge, attitudes, perceptions, opinions, behavior? And then essentially you pick out the scales, and then you want to start the validation of your questionnaire, and you want to have a panel of experts look at your questionnaire, and then obviously IRB approval. Then you want to do a field test, or pilot testing, at which time you do some revisions. You look at the readability of the questionnaire. Then you do the pilot testing for reliability, and then you do a bunch of statistical analysis to look at construct validity and internal validity, and then you're ready to send out your instrument. So all these steps, I mean, we're really just going to be looking at this part of the questionnaire development in this session. So I want you to look at this slide. So essentially, what do you measure? What do you want to measure in a questionnaire? And this is a title of one paper. And I found it interesting that these authors a survey of perception, knowledge, awareness, and attitudes. So I couldn't get the original paper. I will try to do so, but I would be interested to know what kind of questions these authors develop in order to assess perceptions, knowledge, awareness, and attitudes. So having said that, the question I want to ask you is, what does KAP stand for? And actually, I want to make sure you guys are still out there with me. So let me do a little poll. So everyone, tell me, does this stand for knowledge, awareness, perceptions, knowledge, awareness, practices, or knowledge, attitude, practices? Okay. Why don't you vote on what you think it is? Because we're always saying we're doing KAP surveys. Okay, a few more votes. Okay, 2 more seconds. This is anonymous, by the way, so you could feel free to put down what you think might be the wrong answer. All right, let me share the results. And as we can see, 57% said knowledge, attitudes, practices. The other large choice was knowledge, awareness, perceptions. Okay. All right. Well, I find that an interesting result there. So I think routinely it stands for knowledge, attitude, practices. Now, we sometimes want to assess awareness, though we may want to go over what's the difference between knowledge and awareness. But this question for me leads me to ask this question: why do we measure knowledge, attitudes, practices? And you could unmute yourself if you want. Anybody? Why do we do this? What's the end goal here?
Change policies, maybe.
Change policies. Okay.
It's a surveillance of the current situation.
I'm sorry?
It's an assessment of a current situation.
Assessment of the current situation. Tell me more about that.
Before implementing any new policy, any intervention or anything, we should know where we stand and what's the current situation. Then we apply what we want, and then we measure.
And why are we measuring attitudes and practices and perceptions and opinions?
because it's changeable.
What's that?
It's changing.
Changing. What do you want to change?
It could help in prevention of a certain problem.
Prevention of a certain problem.
Yes.
Well, do we need attitudes for that?
Yes, because knowledge is not enough. So, like the smoking, most of people know that smoking.
Oh, okay. A certain. I was going to ask you, what do you mean by a certain problem? And I guess the example you're using is a certain behavior, right?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, right. So that's, I mean, when we start measuring knowledge, attitudes, practices, the end goal here, most of the time, is we want to change behavior in order to promote a more healthy lifestyle. Now, a lot of market research. Well, no, even with why do a lot of companies do market research? What's their end goal? They're not interested in healthy behavior. They're interested in consumer behavior, and they want to know why would certain consumers buy one product versus the other. And so the theory of behavior is very interesting. And right before someone acts, there's an intent, but we need to look at attitudes, behavioral beliefs, subjective norms, control beliefs. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that we want to, in order to change behavior, we need to know what drives behavior. And behavior is multi-dimensional, in which the most causal point is the intent, and then the attitudes drive the intent, and then you have all the other aspects that goes into behavior that includes knowledge, perceptions, awareness, opinions, and most important, we have the attitudes. So importance of attitudes, very causally linked to behavior. Researchers are interested in people's attitudes. An attitude is a psychological construct. It is a person's predisposition to respond favorably or unfavorably to activities, people, events, and objects. Attitudes are often considered a precursor to behavior. So think about that. Why are we doing these surveys? Now, I think, Mahmoud, I think it was you who mentioned change policy. Well, the policy we would start changing has to do with behavior. We want a policy to enhance or, well, essentially change behavior. Now, there could be other types of policies, but that may be driven by a different type of questionnaire. So now, and we'll talk more about attitudes when we talk about perceptions and opinions and knowledge, but attitudes are evaluative statements or judgments. I have an attitude about an object, a person, a belief. It's evaluative concerning objects, people, or events. It's less stable than values, which is a good thing, I guess, because that means you can change attitudes. And it has a cognitive component consisting of opinion or belief, an affective component, an emotional or feeling segment, and it has a behavioral component and intention to behave in a certain way. And we'll talk about scales in just a few minutes, but there's a variety of attitude rating scales to measure the intensity of a attitude, affective, cognitive, or behavioral component. And we'll talk about these different types of scales. All right, so, actually, this slide shows some scales. We'll talk mainly about the Likert scale. It could be dichotomous as well. Essentially, people are giving their preference based on the question you're asking. Okay, so having said that, once you determine what's the purpose of your questionnaire, what you want to measure, I think actually I'm trying to think if there's any. Trying to think about all the questionnaire studies I've done, and I think that if you're not measuring attitude, then I'm not sure what's the purpose of the questionnaire. That might be an interesting study to see. Just look at all the studies that have been done and see how many of them included attitudes. But anyway, but once you determine what you want to measure, attitudes, practices, knowledge, perceptions, you have to pick your type of scales. And it could be a pre-coded single choice questions, rank ordering, rating scales, Likert type questions. And then sometimes you could put in some open-ended questions to try to understand the why people answer the way they did. However, open-ended questions are difficult to analyze, and if you want to start addressing the why, you might as well, do the interview study after the quantitative study, which is known as a mixed method approach. But let's look at these scales. We have we have dichotomous questions: agree, disagree, yes or no. It's the simplest and quickest question to analyze, but not highly sensitive. We have multiple choice, and it's easy to analyze, but may not give the answer we want. Think about this: with the multiple choice, we're constraining the respondents to maybe 3 or 4 choices, and which there may be other choices we might have left out. So this this is pre-coded single choice, and here are some simple questions. What typing do you like the best on dessert? Okay. And marital status, again, pre-coded single choice question. Then presence or absence. Have you ever had contact with a physically handicapped person in any of these groups? And check yes or no, for all these categories. Now, then we have what's called a rank order scale, or an ordinal scale questions. This type of question asks your respondent to rank items or choose items in a particular order from a set. For example, you might ask your respondents to order 5 things from least important to most important. However, again, you could have, a scale with an ordering of different entities. Again, as it is with other types of scales, you're not addressing the why. Then you have rank ordering scales. And again, ask respondents to indicate an ordering of response items. However, again, you have to make the instructions explicit. As I said before, the alternative choice might be missing. And an ordinal scale, when you list these items, you're not really, because you don't know the distance between these items. So as opposed to a number scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you kind of hope you know that this distance between this rating represents has meaning to it. Not so in a rank ordering question. So let's right. Well, let me skip that for now. Oh well, here's what sources do you prefer for writing term papers, and you list all these things: most preferred, least preferred. Again, you don't know how much more important books are as regards to trends. Now, the rating scales could deal with a wide variety of issues, and you have, like 0 to 10, and you have essentially a continuum between two extremes. When you do that, you have to make sure that the anchors are not overly extreme, which would tend to push responses towards the center of the scale. And then you have an itemized rating scale. How likely are you use an open source textbook? Not likely at all, extremely likely to use. And then this slide shows you could have a scale with adjectives like excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor, or you could have a numerical scale from 0 to 10. And sometimes the question to ask is how many categories to offer, or whether denoted by adjectives or by numbers. So let's
Henry?
Yeah.
Can you go back to slides? When you talked about the extremes,
Right.
You don't want responses to be like centered in the middle?
No. The extremes, you don't want it to be overly, how should I say, dramatic.
Okay.
Okay, and because they may not, what's the word, respond to that and say, oh, it's not extremely satisfied. Well, I'm never extremely satisfied about anything. Well, I'll bring this up in just a minute or two when I'll talk about the Likert scale. We usually, put in the words strongly agree, strongly disagree, and I read a recent reference where it said, well, strongly agree. Some people may feel like they never strongly agree about anything. And well, thankfully, that's why we have the agree term. So just be careful here. Extremely satisfied, not at all satisfied. That doesn't seem balanced to me. Not at all satisfied. Extremely satisfied. I don't think I'm ever extremely satisfied about anything. But anyway, thanks for pushing me to clarify that. Okay, so Likert scales. And again, we usually use strongly, disagree, or agree, but even the Likert scale does not address the issue of why. Why are they responding that way? But that's not the purpose of the questionnaire itself. Now, Likert scale, again, here's our typical 5-point scale. Interesting, and I just learned this myself. I knew it was named after Likert, but Likert is pronounced Likert and not Likert. And what could I say? For all these years, I've been using the word Likert, but it's actually Likert. Well, anyway, once you leave this session, you can't say you didn't learn anything today, okay? So anyway, let's leave it at that. So here are the different type of scales. There could be agreement, familiarity, frequency, importance, likelihood, quality, intent. Definitely will do it, definitely will not. So these are, depending on the question you're asking, it may be strongly agree, not important, not likely, definitely will do. So you have a wide choice of scales to use, and here is the typical format that you would use. Now, what I want to point out in this slide, I enjoy using this product. This product meets my needs. I would purchase from this company again. So all those questions are positive, right? Yeah, I agree. Okay, what market all agree. Now, the other thing I want to point out, we have a neutral category, and then I haven't used the product. And the point I want to make out, let me skip this slide. I want to talk about the neutral category. Yes.
Oh, yes, please. I just want to ask about the difference between neutral and unsure.
Yes, right. Yes.
Okay,
and
so
that's what I'm going to get into now. Right. Neutral and unsure, or do not know. Okay. So when the person marks down neutral, the question is the person actually neutral about the subject matter, or is it because the person doesn't know enough about the question or doesn't understand the question? So the neutral category, okay, is will give you a lot of artificial results, or results that cannot be interpreted, because again, you don't know if the person had no opinion or just doesn't, is neutral about the issue or just doesn't know. Right, so don't know versus neutral, okay? The respondent knows about the issue, but doesn't have a positive or negative opinion, or the respondent just doesn't know. And so if you include neutral and not don't know, you'll have an artificial number of neutral answers for people that will include people who just don't know. Years ago, when we did a survey regarding genetic, asking patients about giving blood samples, we had a neutral category, and we asked them, would you give this blood sample for genetic research? And our neutral category was about 60%. Then we educated the patient about what genetics was all about, and then the neutral category went down to about 20%. So actually, and oh, well, before I get into this slide, so, and this is something I've never done. This is actually strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, and then, well, I don't have this slide. The U here stands for undecided, but I thought I had a slide. Here you have undecided, but here I think we should have a category that says don't know. And I'll be honest, I've never done that, but I'm just wondering if that would be a good practice to do, and try to assess how many people just don't know. This slide demonstrates that actually you want to make some statements favorable and unfavorable. And so like the items that are starred are unfavorable. And one reason to mix it up is that this way the respondent just won't check all the agrees. So this is would be an informal way of assessing the internal validity of a questionnaire by mixing up the favorable and unfavorable items. So let's see. Oh, yeah, and getting back to what I was saying before, some people feel that strongly agree is too emotional, strongly disagree. Sorry. And some people may want to use completely agree, generally agree, completely disagree. Though I must admit, it seems like the standard norm is to use the word strongly agree. Okay. All right. Good. So let me switch gears here. We talked about the scales. Let's talk about wording of the question, which is I have found to be very, very important. And like, you know, most of us on this call are involved with that biobank activity, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me that we have spent a lot of time revising these questions, and it's definitely worth the exercise. So we want to make sure the question means the same thing to everyone, and I'll get to this in a few seconds. So essentially, we want to make sure these questions are not ambiguous, and make sure these questions are not being interpreted in different ways. So essentially, we aim for comprehension, use simple languages, and keep sentences brief and concise. Answerability. Respondents should be able to provide accurate answers without having to do the research. And again, we don't want to use ambiguous terms. So, some tips about these questions. One, we don't want to use double-barreled questions. We don't want to have a question that asks the respondents each question should essentially measure one thing. We don't want to try to measure two or more things. For example, do you think the president should lower taxes and spending? And respondents may have different opinions about lowering taxes and spending. Did you finish your work before your boss fired you for always being late? Again, that's double-barreled. Was the content marketing seminar worthwhile and entertaining? Well, it might have been entertaining, but not worthwhile. So actually, I hope this presentation is worthwhile and maybe a little entertaining as well. You want to avoid bias and loaded words. A biased question will lead participants in the direction of a particular answer. Phrases and adjectives and adverbs may add bias to the questions. And depending on how a question is presented, people can react in different ways. And you want to avoid emotionally, politically charged, sensitive words. So let me see now. We'll have some examples later on. I thought I had some examples. And again, you want to avoid vague and imprecise terms. So let's say it's not clear when you ask, how important is it that a candidate shares your values? What kind of values? Are we talking about religious values or ethical values? So what kind of values are we talking about? We want to be specific. So don't ask, what is your income? It's better to ask, what is your total household income before taxes in 2005? You want to be very specific. You don't want to ask, do you exercise regularly? Well, that will mean different things to different people. Yeah, I exercise regularly every weekend. Or does that mean every day? And so again, you want to be specific. Okay, and avoid leading questions. For example, do you think the school should cut the gym budget to pay crossing guards? Okay, and that would prompt a different answer from, should the school employ crossing guards to protect our children? So that might be more of a leading question. And complex sentences with too many clauses or unusual constructions could confuse. And how easy will it be for a typical person to answer, do you think the increase in the rate of immigration controlling for the economy is higher or lower than the increase in the rate of crime in your area? I have no idea. Okay. All right, good. Well, let me skip that for the, oh, right, avoiding leading question. do you believe the U.S. should immediately withdraw troops from the failed war in Iraq, right? Well, what do you think? Do you support or oppose the death tax? Okay. Do you support or oppose President Bush's plan to require standardized testing of all public schools? Well, the important issue is standardized testing. If I don't like President Bush, I may tend to say no. Okay. All right. Good. So let's do a quick exercise to kind of take a break. I'm going to lead the discussion, and then people, why don't you all chime in? Not all, but feel free to unmute yourself and give your thoughts about the question. So let me share my screen. All right. So I have here the and I think everyone could see it. This question here. Let me. I mean, I think everyone was saying that it's a long question. And oh, by the way, a lot of these questions were taken from our biobank questionnaire, and I just looked at some of the older versions we had of the questions. So thoughts on this question here. I think a lot of people were saying that it was too long and blah blah blah. And for me, when I kept on reading this, I thought it was an example of a double barrel question. It was asking, how long have you been involved on biological samples that came from a biobank? So I thought a participant would struggle with, it had to be biological samples that came from a biobank. I thought it was asking too much, so I thought it would be better to ask two different questions. One would be, have you ever participated in research involving the collection of biobank materials? And the other one, have you ever accessed tissue samples from a biobank? So I thought it was two important pieces of information. One, have you ever done on research on biological samples? And two, have you ever interacted with a biobank? Comments from anybody on that one?
I think the definition of biobank need to be in the beginning of the questionnaire, so we can.
Yes, right. I agree. That's a good point. And in fact, if you look at our biobank questionnaire, we have right in the beginning a definition of a biobank. Good point. Okay. Any other thoughts on this question? Okay. The next one, I thought that I thought the word harm was indistinct, and I think some of you thought about that as well. Also coded, but I left out the fact that we do define the word coded in the beginning of these series of questions. So I changed it to, well, social harms like stigma, discrimination. So I wanted it to be less ambiguous. Questions about that? Any other thoughts? So the next one, my thought, well.
Excuse me, actually, I had a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering because when I read the question number 2, I had my mind in a case study. Of
Wait,
like
which question?
Number 2, how likely is it that research participants?
Okay.
So the first minute I saw it, I just thought about the stem cell violation, the ethics violation case study about Huang, and that's why I understand the question, so it didn't seem to me as ambiguous. Is this wrong?
Well, I guess you want to. I mean, again, I thought that the ambiguity comes from the word harm. Is everyone on the same page on what the word harm means? And that's why I gave it more definition.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. So here, I thought improper handling of research results was ambiguous. And now, this could be just as ambiguous, improper use. But here, I define research tissue samples. And now I have here caused harms. And one could say, well, that could be ambiguous as well. And I would agree with that. And some of you have talked about from where the samples were collected. I agree. This is a complex sentence. And I don't even know if this is necessary. I mean, I just don't know. Thoughts about this? Anybody?
Yeah, we have rewritten the statement into the following.
Okay.
Let's see, where is that? Where am I at? Improper handling of research results of a donor can cause harm to his or her community.
Oh, I like that.
Ah, good.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Except that improper handling is not, it's still ambiguous.
Yeah, right. But I like the I like that different type of phrasing. Good. I like that. All right. Let's all right. So let's this one here. Well, I guess any question that's 3 lines long, right? It's bound to be complex. But anyway, I thought this word was ambiguous. Leftover. That's jargon, so I put it into 2 sentences. Frequently, samples obtained from patients. Frequently, samples are obtained from patients who gave informed consent for medical care. I believe it is ethically necessary to obtain reconsent from these patients to do research on it. So I think, so I essentially define what leftover means, and I broke it up into 2 different sentences. Thoughts on that?
I think it's still long.
We thought that ethically is a leading word. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I could definitely agree with that. One doesn't even have to use the word ethically. Good. Good. I like that. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Good.
I had a comment on that.
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering who's our audience that you're asking the questionnaires or the questions for?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Investigators.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree ethically that's leading or bias. I agree. Good point. Okay, very good. Excellent. Please rate. Okay, so here I thought. Well, I didn't know what general results meant. I thought that was ambiguous, and I think a lot of people didn't like this question. What the heck are incidental findings, or incidental findings or not? Okay. So that's ambiguous. Here, just moving right along, the results will show up in his or her medical record, and I just thought it was too wordy, and I just made it into a shorter sentence here. 7 will just a minor change. Will call. I think the IRB would rather have you use the word contact instead. Just a minor point. 8. A lot of you brought up the issue about, what are negative effects that might be leading, and a lot of you brought up the word worry. I think a better word is concern. So the next question, well, maybe investigators, well, I don't know, stigmatizing might be, well, here's the word worry again, and stigmatizing may be too ambiguous. And then the last one, this one we were informed by our cognitive interviews on. This one was for patients, and we were essentially a patient's, a swab of your cheek was very unclear, and I substituted the word saliva.
I think number 8 and number 9 also is targeting research participant, not a researcher.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yes, right. Yeah. So stigmatizing is too unclear. All right, good.
I have a comment for question 7.
Yes.
A researcher will contact the research participant. Person is not suitable in the context of research.
Okay, you can put down participant. That sounds good. All right, good. So, any other remaining thoughts?
Yeah, why is stigmatizing information not clear?
Well, what is stigmatizing information? See, it is unclear. What is stigmatizing?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's like disapproval or discrimination or something that really not good.
Well, yeah. I mean, what is stigma? It could be on the basis of dietary habits, smoking habits, drug use, alcohol use, and well, stigmatizing in terms of genetic research could be if you have a gene for an illness, a gene for obesity. I mean, that could lead to stigma. Any illness that you may have a propensity for. I mean, that's a major concern with genetic research. It could lead to stigma or discrimination. Okay. All right, good. So a lot to think about. So let me actually let me spend the next 15 minutes on attitudes and perceptions. I had another group work, but I think that will be too much. So let's have a general discussion about attitudes and stuff like that. So let me go back to the board, and let's right. All right, very good. So let's let me right. So here, let me start off with. Oh, are you guys? I think I have to share that board. Hang on. Let's see. All right, so here's everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good, thanks. Okay, we're just testing you. So here's a, this is, I took this slide from a paper, and this paper, this was the heading of a section in the paper, all right? Participants' perception. So it's biobanking and biospecimens donation for research. And then it says, table 3 shows participants' attitudes. What's going on here?
Yeah, they are different.
Yes, right. Their attitudes are different from perception, but
Yes.
within, look at this, within an inch and a half, the title of this section was perception, and table 3 shows attitudes. So
Yes.
it was a prime example. I couldn't even make this up, okay? It just shows the confusion. So we've discussed this before with some people on this call, perception and attitude. So perception is how I see the world, okay? Now, it may not reflect reality, and that's okay, but this is how I see the world, all right? And attitude, which is reflected in my behavior, is how I evaluate. I give it an evaluation of what I'm seeing in the world. And so perception is what I see through my own lens, okay? Attitude is how I react to that perception, whether I like it or not. I give a judgment about it. Perception has no judgment. It's how I see the world, okay? And I could stereotype a group, well, stereotyping may be more of an attitude. Why is the distinction important between perception and attitude?
Important for whom?
Well, important. Well, the goal I said before of a questionnaire is to change behaviors.
So if we need to change behavior, we should focus on attitude.
I agree with that, but perceptions are also important.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
they are related.
right. So an attitude may be somewhat based on perception, how I see the world, and depending on how I see the world, I may have a certain type of attitude about it. Now, if I see the world as people acting well, if the police is doing their job, okay, my attitude is that we don't need to have any changes made in how the police doesn't work. I mean, that's, as you most of you know, has been is becoming a big problem here in the U.S. So
I think.
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
I think, attitudes, you can operationalize them. You can make them like behaviors and try to test them in somehow. But
and try to do what? Change them.
Like measure them, and then yes, if you want to see attitudes, then you operationalize the attitude into things that you can measure, so they can be measurable.
Well, attitudes could be, yes, right. Attitudes are measurable. Perception is almost like knowledge. Knowledge is a fact. A perception is how I see those facts. Again, it may not be based on reality, whatever that is, but it all depends on in changing someone's attitude. You may have to change their perception, how they view the world, and that may lead to a change in attitude.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So what's the difference now between the attitude and the opinion?
Okay. Hold that thought. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. So when we refer to a person's attitude, we're trying to explain his or her behavior, why they acted that way. Again, attitudes is very causal to intent and then behavior. And back here is knowledge and perceptions, and it could also be opinions. Okay, attitudes, combination of things we call personality, beliefs, values, behaviors, motivation. Here, an attitude, beliefs, feelings, emotions, and intended behavior. They could be measured and they could be changed. Again, this is social behavioral research. That's important thing about doing this type of research. Now, perception, it's how I perceive things or make sense of information that's coming into my senses. And it's the way we interpret and organize sensation. So again, how I interpret or perceive something could be very different from reality. That's why different people will see different things. Now, perceptions does determine our behavior, how we see the world. Okay, if we know how people see the world, that's another aspect of how we may understand their behavior. So, yeah, what do you think about this? Which one is perception and attitude? We have 4 things here. People who give biospecimens help prevent diseases. Giving a biospecimen is a waste of time. Giving a biospecimen gets in the way of medical care. Personal information is unlikely to be stolen from a biobank.
The first one is perception.
Yeah, right. So this is perception.
Mhm. This is attitude, number 2.
Yeah, so this is perception, attitude.
Yes,
So
exactly.
what's that?
Yeah, I'm saying yes, exactly. This was my thought.
Yeah, right. And uh, so as we'll talk about, I keep on looking at this myself, and sometimes I think, hey, maybe this is an opinion, but let's get to that. But I think these two are perceptions. Okay. Oh, okay. There it is. There's the answer. Okay. Knowledge and opinion. Okay. Knowledge is a fact. It's considered unproven. It's an idea. I mean, you don't have to prove it. It's a fact. Knowledge is. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, knowledge is proven. An opinion are interpretations of a fact. And knowledge is what it is, and opinion is what you think it is. And so the United States was established in 1776. pH levels are lower than pH level in alkalines. Beethoven had a reputation as a virtuoso pianist. Someone could call that an opinion. So I think most people will say, well, he did have a reputation as a virtuoso pianist. So this would be an opinion. Beethoven's reputation is overrated. That was a good movie, okay? Strawberries taste better than blueberries. George Clooney is the sexiest actor alive. The death penalty is wrong. So all these are opinions. Now, take a look at this. The death penalty is wrong. If I change that, the death penalty is I just have the word in my mind. The death penalty. How would you change that to an attitude?
Is unethical? Say.
Yeah, right.
Is acceptable? The death penalty is
that death penalty reflects poorly on a society, or a death penalty give it more of a belief.
I support the death penalty.
I'm sorry?
I support the death penalty. Would that be
Yeah,
an
I think
attitude?
that's closer to an attitude. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So again, facts, opinions, knowledge, perception versus reality versus opinion. What you think is always shaped by how you see and understand things. So opinion is what you think about something. Perception is the way you look at something. So the sequence, opinion is based on perception. Perception is formed before the opinion. And so think about that, about perception and opinion. So again, let me see this other slide. So what do you think about this? Take a look at this slide. What do you think?
I think the first one, women express their emotions more than men, is the perception. And women are very emotional about their illness. This is an opinion. Women tend to talk or to take their medicine. No, here I don't know about this, but the last one, women cannot be trusted to take their medicine, is also perception, I think.
Well, I thought I'm looking at this. At first, I put down attitude.
No, this is not attitude.
What do you think?
Attitude.
Tend not to take their medicines. This is an attitude.
Yes. Yes, this is an attitude. But the last
Yeah.
one,
The last one is an attitude.
Yeah.
women cannot be trusted to take their medicine, is not an attitude. It's an attitude of a person who thinks so, but not attitude for women.
I didn't say.
Regarding the last question, is it depend about who do we ask? If we are asking a caregiver, it will be attitude.
I don't think it depends on who the person is.
I think women cannot be trusted to take their medicine is an opinion, purely an opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be
Or a
an
perception.
opinion.
Women cannot be trusted to take their medicines. I think it's a perception.
Well, I think there's a evaluative component to that more than a perception. There's nothing evaluative about this statement. And the same thing, there's no, I'm not evaluating anything. Attitudes tends to evaluate, and I think cannot be trusted. It's more of a evaluative sentence. So let me, so interesting. I'll end with this last slide. What I have here is I read a paper in which it had table 2, researchers' perspectives. And I emailed the author and I asked her to give me the survey. She used a survey from somebody else's paper, and she emailed me the survey. And in the other survey, these are the same questions, and the other survey had the word opinion. So what I'm trying to say is that I think it's some of you may be saying, why bother understanding the distinction? But I think it is important. Now, I think we might be getting too granular if we talk about opinion, attitude. Opinion and attitude. The distinction between those two concepts may be really fine, but I think there is a stronger distinction between perception and attitude, and those are two different things. And I think I find myself now believing that when we construct surveys, we should really think more about what we're trying to do with the survey and what kind of, are we looking for attitudes and perceptions, or maybe both? And are we looking for knowledge? Is that important for our goals? Are we looking for awareness? So I think when we construct surveys, we should pay attention to how do we want to change behavior, and what's the most important aspect of that behavior that we want to change. Is it perceptions? Is it attitudes? Is it knowledge? Is it awareness? I think all of those things have different, represents different components to behavior, and depending on the behavior we want to change, we may want to reflect more on attitudes or perceptions or knowledge. So let me end with this final thought. If we are interested in responsible conduct and research, what do you think we should concentrate more on? Knowledge, perception, or attitudes? Or rank them. Which is the most important, second and third? Any takers?
Can I talk?
Yes.
For me, perception, then attitudes, and lastly, knowledge. I think perceptions will drive the attitude, and then the knowledge behavior.
Perception of what?
About the research itself, about how to be responsible, or how to conduct research in a responsible way, and the research ethics itself. What do you think about them, to dig deep into the values of people?
I think I was going to say, I think you were saying more about knowledge. Perception, how I see the world.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I should look to the attitude, because the attitude will drive their behavior toward the RCR. This is first, and then followed by knowledge, because if they know well how to avoid plagiarism, for example, they will try to avoid it. So in my opinion, the most important is attitude and then knowledge. Thank you.
What do you guys think about that ordering?
In my opinion, I think the first thing has to be the knowledge. So I can drive from the knowledge, the perception, and the attitude. I think the attitude and the perception are two-phase and for the same result, but it has to be the knowledge first. That's
okay. It has to be. Okay. All right. Any other takers? I think the interesting thing is how we think differently about which is most important, and depending on what we think is most important, will determine the type of questionnaire we will develop. So having said that, I actually do think attitudes are most important, than knowledge, and then perception. But let's talk about that some more at another time. So anyway, guys, I held you here for 2 hours, and I want to thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And I hope this was somewhat worthwhile and maybe a little entertaining. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
To ask something?
Yes, sure.
Is there any way that we can have some of the papers that you shared in the PowerPoint? Like we can practice more about understanding more the differences between.
I'm sorry. What was that?
I was asking if you can share some of the papers, the research papers that show the differences between the attitude and perception.
Yeah, let me, absolutely. Let me, I have all your emails. I'll send you the PowerPoint and maybe some papers as well. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Henry.
Thank you.
All right. All right,
Yeah.
guys. Thanks.
Yeah, have a good day.
Thanks for joining. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.